The Canby Report was produced and recorded on the traditional territories of the Coquitlam, Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabeg, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples. It's March 5th, 2023, and there are 1,322 days left until the Vancouver municipal elections. This is the Canby Report. I'm Matthew Naylor.
I'm Ian Bushfield. It's budget season. We had a provincial budget. It is still before the legislature, but in the time it took them to read the budget speech in Victoria, they passed one in Vancouver. We're going to talk about that.
Yes, so Vancouver... Well, basically, Vancouver decided that it didn't have enough money.
Matthew, speaking of money, we have to ask for money.
Oh, yes, of course.
We're so excited to talk about money today. Give us some money, patreon.com/Canby Report.
Yes, patreon.com/Canby Report, your source for citizen journalism here in the glorious city of Vancouver and its environs. /Canby Report. If you can afford it after your property tax increase, please consider chipping a couple of bucks in to keep this podcast on the air. Or on the internet, I guess.
Yeah, on the web. It flows over some Wi-Fi. Vancouver budget. So, city staff, they came forward going, times are tight, inflation is high, wages need to go up, infrastructure needs to be renewed, all of these additional charges. People are going to have to pay 9.7% more just to keep up without any additional commitments from council. And Matthew, how did our fiscally conservative, no budget increase promise new council respond to that?
They took a look at that and said, humbug, absolutely not, and instead increased it by 10.7%. Amazing. So...
No notes.
Yeah, well done. I love looking at the tweets that Sarah Kirby-Young and Lisa Dominato and Rebecca Bly talked about during their previous term on council when they're like, ooh, this 6.7% increase is too much for the poor taxpayers of Vancouver. Little did they know.
Turns out governing is hard and requires some difficult decisions. Ken Sim and ABC seem to have realized that. Ken Sim's quote on the budget increase is, "It sucks." Pithy, accurate, yep. But also you were in charge of it.
So basically, what does this mean for the average person in Vancouver? So the average single-family home is going to end up paying about $470 more next year. The owner of the average condo will pay an extra $150. Are going to be taking the brunt of this. They will be paying approximately $670 more.
Yeah, so that additional increase, the original increase kind of spread across the board with small increases, 1% here, 1% there, 2.7 for the Vancouver police, and just kind of 5% trickling to grow the city to meet the growing city's needs. Now, it came out just ahead, and then it was released as kind of an omnibus motion, as BC has a governing majority and they can pre-plan things and be efficient. Lots more money. So $4.19 million to Vancouver Fire Rescue, another $600,000 for grass and plant maintenance. That mowing the grass is finally going to happen.
I mean, $300,000 to engineering services. This I'm very gratified to see because they were considering cutting things like dikes when they were talking about finding efficiencies. $180,000 for cleaning grants to support plazas and parklets, and $110,000 to the Vancouver Public Library to hire one person to train staff in crisis prevention and intervention. Now, they're still saying that they want to find the efficiencies that they promised, but I think they've decided that they'd rather do some stuff rather than cut some stuff. And, honestly, I kind of feel like that's the general disposition of most people when they get into government.
I'll give them a bit of charitable credit here. It's hard to find efficiencies. Like, it's not going to magically churn up overnight that you can solve all the issues or churn the city around. So I'm sure they will find some things to cut.
We told them that.
Yeah, that was not going to happen in 100 days. Buried further down in the motion was another $3.4 million for the Vancouver Police Department. This covered various things, including cost of living adjustments, $670,000 to cover statutory holiday pay for Truth and Reconciliation Day, which they get holiday pay just like any other worker, but some people flag that on Twitter. Money for body-worn cameras, money for cell phones, $415,000, and then just, money across the board for a lot of different things. This was a 20-point motion brought forward by Councillor Kirby Young. What's really interesting here is this budget wasn't controversial. I said it went through in the same day. Usually budgets take quite a while and could be quite contentious like they were in the previous council. But here, even with a council that's majority, they still got unanimous votes on most of this. It seems like Boyle and the Greens didn't take issue with giving money to firefighters and to engineering and the library. Things that are pretty unobjectionable, especially for the progressives on council. The only line item that got some pushback was from Councillor Boyle, who opposed some of the increases for the Vancouver Police Department. That was more of a symbolic vote by herself in the corner than was going to do anything. Because also, as we learned, even if council voted against the police department budget, they could still get it.
Go figure. So, we've been saying that Vancouver is undertaxed for some time. 10.7% is a hefty increase. Acknowledging that, I think this is within the bounds of being bearable. It's certainly, as things go, less than the increase in the value of the properties are going to be, people are going to gain more equity than they are paying in tax.
They have. It's been a weird year in the real estate market where things have jumped and then come back a bit. But overall, if you've held your home for more than a year or two, you've definitely accrued those gains. On paper, at least. And for many people with limited cash income, you can defer your property taxes, so it's not like a real hit to you today. What I find really fascinating about this is the politics, right? Because Ken Sim and ABC come in saying, we need to keep taxes down. Every increase has been too much. And they had to make that tough choice, right? Do they fund the promises that they made and the continued operation of a largely effectively run city? For all the complaints people have, your garbage gets picked up, right? Pothills generally get filled, although maybe not as fast. Things get done in Vancouver, and it's a nice place to live. People want to live there. And so the question is, do you go austerity, or do you, eat the political hay? And, this is year one of a 4-year mandate. If there's a time when Ken Sim can take the hit of being the high-tax mayor, it's today.
Yes, and politically, I think this is probably the wisest thing to do. People don't want to see their engineering services be unable to do the engineering that they want. If city services start to crumble, people will object, and that will come back to bite a mayor and their party in the ass in the next election.
As it did for the previous one.
Yes.
So there you have it. A budget with little controversy, but a big headline. It's just fascinating how different this was than the last 4 years.
In our next story, the headline isn't going to come now. It's going to come much later, and it's going to be much more disastrous. Port Coquitlam has increased its property taxes by only 3.38%. They are doing this to save people money, and also in doing so, they are putting basically no cash in their cash reserve.
Yeah, I think this was most notable because as news of the 10.7% increase in Vancouver came out, Brad West was tweeting about how low tax Port Coquitlam is, and they're like, we kept ours to 3.38. What are you guys doing over there? The subtle, he didn't directly name Vancouver, but it was clearly time to be haha, we don't have to pay as much. And Justin McElroy with Metro Matters, CBC's newsletter, interviews him and asks him, like, can you really afford to do this? And he says, I get it. In 50 years, we might have to replace a piece of infrastructure that's going to be very expensive, and it is responsible to put money away for that. But at the same time, you have to balance that with the current taxpayers' ability to pay. And, like, it just makes me think that Port Coquitlam is being run like an irresponsible strata.
Yeah.
They're not paying their maintenance fees, they have no reserve, and the building's going to fall apart.
Oh, well, I guess Port Coquitlam chose this when they elected... Oh, wait, they didn't elect Brad West. They just acclaimed him. Democracy kind of short-circuited in Port Coquitlam last time around, and this is what you get.
It's not like they were going to vote for the guy who was like, or woman or person who was like, I'll raise taxes by a sufficient amount to make sure we have a healthy reserves. None of these people are going to be mayor when Port Coquitlam's facilities start crumbling, and they are literally crumbling in Vancouver at the moment, and they're facing 10% increase, so maybe I just don't even know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we did have a side of the aquatic center fall off. Back in Vancouver, a secret meeting has been used to kill the living wage policy. So, up until the passage of this policy, the city had been a certified living wage employer for about, more than 5 years. And they haven't, precisely killed the policy. They have amended the policy. But basically what they're doing is, instead of paying the living wages for families BC estimated rate, the city will now pay wages based on a 5-year rolling average of the rate.
It does mean they will not be certified as a living wage employer anymore. There's two interesting aspects to this. The first is that it was done in camera last month, and it was done, I think, before a series of articles came out speculating whether the city would maintain its status as a certified living wage employer given the change in administration. It turns out they'd already made the decision, just they didn't tell anyone about it because they did it in a closed meeting. And I think their justification for doing that was it deals with employment issues, but when you change a policy, you do have to publicize the results of that vote, that it changed something.
Eventually.
Someone's going to find out when you make a change in a closed meeting.
Yeah, in-camera meetings are for, dealing with specific employees, at least in my understanding. You should be doing the broad contract stuff out in the open if you're able to. And I don't know if there's any specific policy that would prevent them from doing so, but if there was, I would find that odd.
Yeah, it was a weird decision to go in camera for this. And I, looking into this, see where the city came from, and I wonder if this did originate from staff as a recommendation at first. The living wage this year actually jumped by 17%, and I went and found the report itself and verified this number because this is what the city was claiming, but it went from $20.90 an hour to $24.08 per hour. So a over $3 increase, which is a pretty nice chunk of change for city workers. The city had basically just been setting their minimum wage as the living wage, and looking at the report itself from the Living Wages for Families BC and the CCPA, they say the policy changes over the last 3 years have actually counterbalanced the cost of living in many ways. These are policies from the provincial and federal governments, like childcare benefits and just putting money back in people's pockets. And they say, as a result, the Metro Vancouver living wage declined significantly in 2019 and remained below its 2018 level until this year. Those savings from the affordability improvements have been completely wiped out by rising cost of living, though, and so we jumped by 17%. They then, in the next paragraph, also point out that they changed their calculation for housing costs because they realized they'd been undercalculating and not really reflecting true housing costs, and that also bumped the number up a bit.
Okay, so, on the face of this, I acknowledge that this impacts you directly, this blows, but this does suck. However, 70% over 1 year is a huge increase for the city to bear, and it's also, if the cost of living goes down, you don't really want to be seeing decreases in city wages. I actually think a 5-year rolling average isn't a terrible way to do that.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things. The city staff seem to also point out that, this annual jumping around from this report makes it a bit administratively difficult for a large employer, and I could see that. Now, Yeah, I think this is probably a reasonable, in the end, way to balance it out. It does cost them their certification. Presumably, if the calculation stays largely the same over the next few years, I don't think they want to change it dramatically every year, or else they totally discredit their methodology. But yeah, it's a messy situation, and I see why the decision was made, but it would have been nice to have counselors on the record. Instead, we have Councillor Christine Boyle, who opposed the decision, speaking out that she did, and one city is petitioning and challenging as much as they can in the public domain, but we don't really have the statements from any other counselors about what they thought.
No, and that would have been nice to have. Again, like, this isn't the kind of thing that should have been done in private. This should have been out in the open. I get it. Like, this kind of thing sucks, but...
as Ken Sim would say.
Yes. That is where I was getting it. As for other municipalities around the province, Port Coquitlam, Quesnel, and Victoria are paying the increased living wage. So, let it be known that I do want people to be paid a living wage, but like there does have to be, I think, some accountability for the people who are deciding these policies. You can't do it in private. Speaking of accountability,
we have Progress Vancouver's election report in. They were late. We didn't have it last episode for when we did our breakdown of the public financing. And for the assignment that was turned in late, this is a doozy of a document. Now, a number of different candidates turned theirs in late, and they weren't very notable. The entire team, I believe, cast of candidates all turned in their very basic reports late, like Bill Thielman and Colleen Hardwick. This is the individual candidate, the electoral organization, the party put its in, and that's where all the finances were accounted for. Individuals still have to put their own ins and just say, we didn't spend any money personally, it was all through the party. That's not really notable. Progress is, though, it's first interesting to see, where did they sit on the spending spectrum? They raised $256,000, and we need to come back to that number in a second. And they spent $265,000, was significantly less than one city who spent $400,000, and more than like the Greens and Vision Vancouver, who I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it was like $160,000. So a modest amount. They ran a mayoral campaign, but it placed fourth, and they struggled to go beyond that.
So this is where we get into some of the more interesting stuff. There is, let's say, irregularities and inappropriate accounting on the report that has been turned in. Basically, Progress has accepted a $50,000 loan from a man named Jason McLean in February 2022, which was solicited to finance the day-to-day administration of Progress Vancouver. This was basically supposed to be their outside of the campaign period operating expenses. However, this isn't allowed. The party basically didn't do their homework and forgot about the December 1st, 2021 proclamation of the Local Election Statutes Amendment Act, which basically says that all loans to an electoral organization are loans for election expenses and subject to the prescribed limit on loans for non-financial institutions. I know that's a, mouthful, but basically they accepted money when they shouldn't have, and that is bad.
Yeah, this is filled out under the prohibited loan section of the return, so they acknowledge that, we done fucked up. They go on to state in their disclosure that Progress Vancouver became aware of the amendments having come into effect only after it had paid bills for the purposes set out above. It hoped to be able to return Mr. McLean's loans through campaign contributions, but has not been successful to date in doing so. In other words, they were going to pay him back, but they just spent the money and haven't raised enough to pay him back yet. And they are continuing to solicit donations, hoping to repay him. Which, as many a failed leadership candidates in many different races will attest, is not easy. So good luck, Mark and crew. So credit to Bob Mackin for flagging that, because he wrote it up in Business in Vancouver, and that's where I saw it, and that was neat. And that got me to actually scroll through the entire report. It's still messy. You go in the report itself, they include, like every other party does, the list of donations they got and the list of names in there, and I'm not going to go through and find like the fancy names of the developers. Some other people have already done that. It's not as notable at this point. What I found notable was the string of names that were just listed as deposit dash check dash need name or need names. This included a $7,500 deposit on April 20th, 2022, and a $15,000 deposit on September 16th, 2022 of checks.
There were a bunch of other donations that were simply listed as e-transfer or Stripe, including several that hit the max donation allowable under the Act.
Which, like, they didn't report any anonymous donations, and they're not supposed to be accepting anonymous donations at that level for sure. And so,
sloppy.
yeah.
Like, it's clearly like priorities were elsewhere, and they didn't care enough to cross their I's and dot their T's, as the case may be, while the actual election was going on. Also notable is that they are on the list of Elections BC's latent disqualified candidates. They noticed that because they ran someone for Director of Electoral Area A, needed to file 2 different disclosure statements. They only filed 1 disclosure statement for both the City of Vancouver and Electoral Area A. These are different jurisdictions. They're not allowed to do that. It needs to be 2 forms.
Embarrassing.
But as someone who has forgotten to file their forms for Electoral Area A, I sympathize and hope they were able to rectify the mistake as painlessly as possible.
Yeah, I don't know what next steps Elections BC will be taking on this. They haven't posted the individual donations in the database yet from this year, so presumably they're still analyzing this and the other late forms in. Sanctions could be anywhere from, additional fines to disqualification in future elections, which, a lot of people across the province have been disqualified from running in the next election, including a significant number of candidates in SD 92, the Nisga'a School District. Don't know what happened up there, but a whole bunch of people decided not to file their paperwork. So if you are in the Nisga'a School District, get in touch with us and tell us what happened.
From clearing checks to clearing tents, Vancouver is apparently stepping up its efforts to clear downtown east side streets, including bylaw notices and confiscating belongings.
Yeah, I've seen a couple individual accounts of this, people messaging or posting on social media, and we have a Vancouver Sun piece now fully writing it up of, individuals in the downtown east side who are homeless, are living on the street, and are giving their accounts of police sweeps, essentially. Pivot is out there with them calling these actions a charter violations, pretty much alluding to similar rulings that have happened in Abbotsford and elsewhere when individuals are not provided adequate housing as an alternative before they are evicted from tent cities. And so the question here is, what is the city providing to people they are asking to leave, or are they not really forcing them to leave? Are they just kind of saying, hey, you should move? And in some cases, they're not forcing it. It's a bit messy, the facts in this one.
Yeah, and what I am unclear on is who is doing this. My suspicion is that it is like under the direction of the city and still under ABC/police initiative. The province has said that they are going to take over operations in the downtown east side, but that is going to be quite a schmozzle to coordinate and control, especially when you have all these different organizations that can kind of act on their own initiative. The city is claiming that they are offering shelter for the residents that are being removed, but what exactly that is, we don't know the specifics of. Oftentimes these offerings are inadequate and make people feel less safe than living on the street, which is really saying something about the state of social housing in the city of Vancouver.
Exactly. That's what Nathan Griffiths, the Vancouver Sun journalist, gets into in his piece really well, that it's worth reading and just kind of getting a sense of what's happening from that perspective. It's a tough situation, and yeah, I had totally forgotten that the province was planning to step in, and everything quoted in here is from the city, so my sense is that it's still the city rather than David Eby in the province yet.
From SRO hotels to a brand spanking new hotel, a new hotel has been proposed at 516 to 534 West Pender Street. Marcon is calling for a hotel that is going to be 578 rooms in a 32-story, 100% hotel tower at the southwest corner of the intersection at West Pender Street and Richard Street.
Yeah, this is just a very preliminary development application as far as I can tell, but it's very notable, right? Because Vancouver has not had a hotel built, a big hotel, in a while. And particularly through the pandemic, hotel rooms, a couple hotels shut down, a couple were converted to temporary housing. And so hotel rates are obscene in downtown Vancouver. And alleviating that, it's not like the number one priority in most people's minds, the housing crunch. But if you want to be a city that attracts a tourist industry, as Vancouver does, you need hotel spaces, and this is a cool project that looks like it will fill a nice space. And they're replacing a parking garage. It couldn't even be better from that point.
Yeah, I was talking with a friend the other day about how so many politicians keep talking about how they want to stop the war on cars, and me just sitting in the corner thinking, no, the war on cars must begin at once. And eliminating a parking garage and bringing in a tourist generating place is a good place to start. From a project in downtown Vancouver to a project on the Fraser River in Burnaby, a green waste facility is going to, and this is something I hadn't heard of before, the alternative approval process.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone had heard of this other than whoever wrote the law decades ago, and it changed to this from the counter petition proposal. So the project itself is a $182 million green organic waste facility that would be constructed on 21 acres of parkland within Fraser Foreshore Park. This is the park that's against the Fraser River, basically the southernmost tip of Burnaby, south of Marine Way at Big Bend Market Crossing. It's a very forgettable piece of Burnaby, unless you drive Marine Way a lot. I looked at a map and was like, isn't this Vancouver? Oh no, wait, it's that, part of Burnaby where there are farms.
Yeah, although I have worked for a number of organizations that are headquartered down there, and I have used that park before.
It's a nice park.
It's a nice park. It's very fun to ride your bike on in the connection between the horrible smelling fish plant, whatever that thing is at the edge of Vancouver, and Westminster. So
the awkward thing for the city is, under the community charter, they can't just dispose of parkland and convert it to whatever they want to do with it using normal council processes. Changing a park to a green waste facility would require a referendum, except there's a secret alternative approval process available to skip the referendum.
Yeah,
well,
so
explain it.
Basically, if 10% of registered voters, so in Burnaby's case this means 16,250, counter-petition the proposal, the city either has to nix the project or go to referendum. If those signatures aren't received, the process passes without going to referendum. So basically, this is saying that it transforms it from a positive approval process to a negative approval process. If the uproar is so great that Save the Park campaign, which I'm sure will eventually bring into action, decides that they will mobilize enough time and money and volunteers to get those 16,250 people to sign, the city actually, not even go to a referendum in this. They're just going to not proceed.
Yeah, and part of the reason they decided to enable this situation, this tool, was that they say it's cheaper in the end, because they don't need to print out ballots and mail them to every Burnaby resident and do a full mail-in ballot initiative over this and referendum. So they can just post on their website that, here you can download a form, sign it, send it to us if you are against this. And, if 16,251 or 16,250 people do that, they kill the project. I don't know what they do about green waste in the meantime, because presumably there's a demand for this facility. I guess it'll have to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I don't know, whatever they're doing with it right now.
Yeah. It's just a really fascinating process. It initially, to me, looked like the council was entirely shirking their responsibilities and just being like, well, we're going to do this project. We'll give 10% a citizen's veto, which sounded wild until I recognized that they had to either do this or a referendum. And I don't know which is better in that. I don't think either of us. Okay.
This is better. Referendums are bad. We shouldn't govern by them. I acknowledge that park space is a huge issue, and we shouldn't dispose of it lightly. Citizenry is not equipped to make granular policy decisions. It's not what democracies are like. This isn't how we should govern ourselves. Yeah, I hope I acknowledge that you were probably going to say I don't think either of us is particularly in favor of referenda, and the answer is yes, I am not.
What's also fascinating here is Burnaby's turnout in the last election. They, like Port Coquitlam, did not have a contested mayor's race. It's below 20%. They need roughly half of the number of people who voted to actually turn out for this, and this is going to be a lower information situation than what's the official election campaign? 5 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it was.
Yeah, basically, this park's days are numbered. This isn't going to happen, and we should all prepare for a delightful new way to dispose of green waste in Burnaby, because it's coming.
The council unanimously supported going this way, although two councillors, Alison Gu and Daniel Tetro, both of the Burnaby Citizens Association, BCA, got motions through asking staff from Gu to explore ballot request process and see if there's a way to make it very easy for citizens to get ballots or petition forms in this case. And Tetrol's motion was to help promote engagement, making sure that people could be aware the situation was happening. Although, as some of the media coverage notes, it's awkward for the city to kind of raise awareness about an issue that they probably want to happen, but then people will have to write in if they are against. It's like, here's this great thing we're doing, don't complain about it. Mm-hmm. But if you want to, here's how.
Yeah, like, it's... I don't know, that's a sort of the kind of thing that a responsible democracy has to do. I support this as a alternative to, like, a dumb parks land disposal process. Green waste does need to be dealt with somehow, so...
I think what's notable is that two councillors, also from the BCA, voted against Gu and Tetrol's motions. This is Sav Dhaliwal and Pietro Calandino. They argued citizens already have plenty of information about this. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. So I think there's a bit of a split there between Gu and Tetrol, who are probably a bit more sympathetic to the Save the Park position, and Dhaliwal and Calandino to just the, like, let's get the money and build the big waste facility. I'm reading between the lines there, but if you want to save the park, go to burnaby.ca, find the form, and get it in by April 28th. I've seen already in a few of the Burnaby forums, like, people are mad about this. It will be interesting to watch if it actually happens, or doesn't.
You're not the only one reading between the lines. The Surrey Police Union has read into the actions of one councillor, Rob Stutz, vote and other activities on the Public Safety Committee, which is involved in the return to RCMP. Basically, Councillor Rob Stutt, who is ex-RCMP himself, his son works for the RCMP and his daughter works with the city, but is seconded to the RCMP.
Just a bunch of cops.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The Surrey Police Union claims this creates a conflict of interest that should have been declared, and he should have recused himself from votes on the RCMP contract. And we're back at it, beating the drum of what constitutes of interest, what is a pecuniary interest or an indirect pecuniary interest with respect to municipalities in British Columbia. Is this a conflict of interest itself? And the answer is no, probably not.
Yeah, that comes from our reading and understanding of the community charter and the conflict of interest provisions therein, as well as Surrey's own code of conduct, which basically just references the community charter. They have a section in there on conflicts of interest, and they say a council member shall rigorously avoid situations which may result in claims of pecuniary interest, there you go, conflict of interest, or bias. I don't know how council members avoid all situations that result in claims of bias. Seems like their job.
Literally, the job of an elected official is to take positions on things. What is that other than bias?
What's notable here is Surrey has a position of ethics commissioner, and that person is being asked by the union to possibly investigate this. They don't actually have an ethics commissioner because Doug McCallum didn't hire a new one, that notable beacon of ethics and morality and governance, Mayor McCallum. But Brenda Locke is committed to hiring a new one in the next month. So
thanks. So no heroes in this story. Everyone is either wrong or wrong in a different way. Like, no, this isn't conflict of interest. Rob Stuff doesn't have shares in the RCMP. Like, his pension is safe. His son doesn't create a indirect punitive. Like, only your partner can give you like a familial pecuniary interest. I guess if your children were dependents, I can't imagine that they are.
So is that what differentiates the situation in the city of Vancouver, where multiple councillors in the last term especially would recuse themselves from votes on Vancouver Police Department funding, or were they just being overly cautious, do you think?
No. Like, Dominato and DeGenova are... or DeGenova, at least, it's either Sarah Kirby-Young or Lisa Dominato. I can't remember which one off the top of my head. But, like, they are married to police officers. Right. That does create a pecuniary interest, and so they did need to recuse themselves.
Good to clarify that. Is not clear is what the fuck is going on in Harrison Hot Springs. I mostly want to flag this really good piece from the Fraser Valley Current, a great newsletter for politics news if you're in the Fraser Valley or just want to follow it. They all hate the mayor there, and the mayor hates the old mayor, who is now a councillor.
Yeah, what a disaster. Basically, outgoing mayor Leo Facio decided to run for council instead and endorsed another councillor for mayor. Ed Wood, running for mayor, he was a Facio critic, won with 44%, defeating the mayor's pick, who got 34%, and another critic of the former mayor, who got 22%. A resounding win for a new way of operating in the city. However,
Facio won his seat, and the other 3 people who were elected to council have allied with him pretty hard. Only 5 people ran for the 4 seats, so not a hotly contested race for council. This means that the mayor is kind of on his own, and therefore it's been quite awkward when, for example, at his victory speech, he complained about the previous council and said, we're going to fix things finally. And people, I guess, were reportedly, including this ex-mayor and other, just walking out on his speech. Classy stuff. Speaking of walking out, so has a significant chunk of the village's staff. 2/3 seem to have quit or have retired as of the end of January of the senior management. There's only one of the 3 admins who are listed on their Contact Us page who are still working there. Because I guess they have no one left to update the website.
This is hilarious. So, Ed Wood, the new mayor, is claiming that the rest of council is meeting behind his back. This is in part because he has denied requests for closed meetings. They were also asked to receive a 7% cost of living increase, but on January 4th, the councillors voted themselves a 30% increase in their salaries and a $1,000 computer stipend.
Fraser Valley Current notes that accounts for a 6% increase for the average councillor in Harrison. They are well paid. We're both in favor of politicians being well paid, but Hot Springs councillors are among the top paid among similar sized municipalities. They're in the league with Anmore, the wealthy.
Oh boy.
Yeah, they're rich out there. They're for part-time small community council. Wood decided he did not like the look of this wage increase that included for himself, and so he brought it to a full council meeting out of committee and lost the reconsideration vote 4-1. During that meeting, apparently shit hit the fan as he attempted to eject the former mayor Facio from the meeting, and he just refused to leave. He was allowed to apologize, and then everyone kind of saved face, but it was a mess. There were calls for non-binding votes of confidence. Read the whole story. It's just what is happening. And also credit to the Harrison Agassiz Observer. I believe it's a paper out there that's doing good reporting as well.
So, in order to solve these, total breakdown in council relations, by the way, good luck over the next several years, citizens of Harrison Hot Springs, council has agreed to unanimously agreed to write a letter asking for the inspector of municipalities for help. Just being hey, we failed. What on earth is happening?
Have you ever heard of this position, Matthew?
I have not.
We're learning so much about municipal governance in this province, and we've been doing this podcast for several years now. This is the week for obscure community charters.
Yeah, this is year 5. Year 5, Season 3.
So the Fraser Valley Current reached out to the province and learned that the Inspector of Municipalities, which is a position designated in legislation of basically a person who's supposed to step in and fix municipalities that are running like shit, which used to be a very frequent problem and is now thankfully not as much. The inspector is technically Tara Faganello, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister for Local Government Division of BC's Ministry of Municipal Affairs. However, being an ADM is a pretty full-time job, so Tara is not really spending, I'm presuming, much of their day inspecting municipalities. It's a title on a piece of paper and not a serious office, so I'm very interested to find out what the province's answer to "we don't know how to fix our broken council help" will be.
Yeah, that is going to be interesting. I don't know. They might, like I have no idea, actually. Like, no one has done anything, like, worthy of punishment here. Maybe of political scorn, but everything appears to be above board. They're going to need to, like, sit down and learn how to work together, or it's going to be a rough couple of years in Harrison Hot Springs.
The Current described it as more dysfunctional than the Chilliwack School Board was a few years ago.
Oof.
That's, yeah, bad.
Speaking of school boards, so the Mission School District Board has banned a group called Action for Canada from presenting at meetings for 1 year following them being absolute pieces of shit, I believe is the technical term.
Yeah, this all arose at a January 10th meeting where the group showed up ostensibly to talk about OG policies, LGBTQ materials in schools.
Danger.
The allegation is that they got screen share on their laptop and they started showing porn, like pornographic materials, during the school board meeting. Yeah, I couldn't fully understand it from the coverage in the local black press paper, but it sounded like a mess. Superintendent Angus Wilson gave a quote to the paper saying, he'd had to meet with them a couple times and they're concerned about many things in Canada, from immigration to vaccines to 15-minute cities.
Which, again, huge red flag. 15-minute cities, I don't know if we've touched on this briefly, but, like, in a previous episode, or whether it was something that, like, I saw and flagged. And basically, there is this huge conspiracy theory now amongst people on what I would call the lunatic wing of the right that says that the desire to create 15-minute cities, which is, communities where you can walk to things you need without using a car within 15 minutes, i.e. nice, livable places that humans have lived in for thousands of years.
Also something I think was in Ken Sim's 2018 and 2022 platforms.
Yeah, evil is a conspiracy to lock people in their communities. Like, that it's
bonkers. They're in the bonkers realm of paranoid delusions.
Yeah, it's absolute nonsense. It's a shockingly community. Edmonton has been dealing with this stuff, and honestly, I'm pretty disheartened by it, because it's like municipal politics has, in general, been pretty free from, like, the lunatic fringe, and this is a thing that has blown up in a big way, and, like, it's just a mind virus.
I guess this group was also spotted at a local policing forum in Mission, and one witness said that during the land acknowledgement at the start of the meeting, someone from Action for Canada interrupted and said it's God's land, not Indigenous land, which is a hell of a thing to just jump in and interrupt someone else's meeting with. Anyway, I saw this headline and was like, banning a group. Am I going to find, like, some civil libertarian side of me that's sympathetic? And I'm just like, no, this seems like the reasonable line to draw where you go, all right, your group can't come back. You can write us a letter, but...
Yeah, and I think that segues nicely into our last story of the night. Last week we were excoriating the city of Coquitlam for never having the, like, sense to distinguish between, like, Nazis and, like, a pride society by flying a pride flag. Their excuse had always been, what if an evil group wants to do this? Basically, students were welcomed to Coquitlam City Council by the Coquitlam Mayor. They were told that Coquitlam plans to support Pride this year, put up rainbow stickers, and even fly flags on city poles. It's unclear whether this means the actual City Hall pole, but well done for doing the correct thing and having like a lick of common sense.
Yeah, it shouldn't have had to come to students, standing up before council and pretty much begging for this, but it sounds like it's the best possible result. And, credit to those students and credit to the counselors and mayor and everyone who came together and did the right thing here. Yeah. It's a good story to end on.
This is great. Like, we can make a difference. People just have to ask, and people have to have some common sense, and things can indeed change for the better. Well done. If you are one of those people who make things change for the better, you might be the subject of a future Vancouverata. All of these people that received this particular honor that is the subject of our Vancouverata today, a little tidbit from Vancouver's history with which we end every show, they are all recipients of something called the Freedom of the City.
Yes, this is an award that is enshrined in the Vancouver Charter. It requires council to have unanimous approval, but it lets them bestow the honor and the title of recipient of Freedom of the City Award. It's been around since 1936.
Oh, Ian, this is much too short. This is actually basically a Roman triumph. This is where the freedom of the city is derived from. This is a tradition that's been going on for thousands of years. When cities want to honor someone, they allow people to retain their titles as they walk across the pomerium, given the freedom to be a general, to be a soldier inside the city of Rome. In Vancouver's case, this is an honor that has been bestowed on people since 1936. They are knights of the special ceremony. They get a framed certificate and a medal, and then their names are inscribed in the Book of Freedoms.
Which is the best part of this. It doesn't sound like you get any fancy keys. You don't get the key to the city. You don't get a real fancy title or anything like the old Romans do. You can't start your own militia out of this. But you are in the Book of Freedoms.
It's called Triumphator.
Yeah, you are in the Book of Freedoms, and that's kind of cool. Who has won this?
So recent Freedom of the City honorees include Cornelia Oberlander, Margaret Mitchell, Judy Graves, Jim Pattison, Jim Green, not James Green, Milton Wong. Imagine if they screwed that one up.
It was a very close vote on that one.
And Mike Harcourt. More other things that have been honored include organizations like the Vancouver Police Pipe Band or the YWCA. And if you scroll back all the way down to 1936, when this honor was originally being bestowed, you begin to find a lot of street signs, actually. So Edward Beatty, Lachlan Hamilton, R.B. Bennett, Eric Camber, William Malkin. Basically a who's who of Vancouver place names from the current day.
So there you go. Do something important with your life and then convince the City of Vancouver Council of the day that you deserved your name in the Book of Freedoms alongside the Seaforth Highlanders and others.
And if you know someone who should be in the Book of Freedoms already, feel free to nominate them to City Council. Members of City Council have to nominate individuals for this award themselves, but write your City Councilor if you think someone deserves this particular honor. But that brings us to an end of another episode of the
Nominate the podcast.
Yeah, okay. For Legged Boot Media, I'm Matthew Naylor.
I'm Ian Bushfield.
Good night.